Hi, educators. I'm Jamie from Amplify, and today we're going to learn how to choose an mClass progress monitoring measure. In this video, you'll learn how to launch a progress monitoring measure within mClass and what information to consider when choosing a measure. Progress monitoring is the practice of assessing students briefly but frequently on the skill areas in which they're receiving instruction. We progress monitor to determine students' progress towards goals, to ensure students are making adequate progress, to provide ongoing feedback about the effectiveness of instruction, and to make timely decisions about changes to instruction. Let's begin by launching a DIBELS progress monitoring measure for a first grade student. To access progress monitoring, navigate to the mClass assessment dashboard, then toggle to progress in the bar at the top left of the class list page. Select a student by tapping the name. Then select a measure from the drop-down. Note that recommended is displayed next to NWF. This will always be the recommendation for Kinder and Grade 1 when NWF is at risk, because NWF is the strongest measure for capturing change over time at kindergarten and first grade. Lectura has the same functionality as DIBELS 8th edition. To access progress monitoring, select Español and toggle to Progress in the bar at the top left of the mClass dashboard. Select a student by tapping the name. Then select a measure from the drop-down. Note that Recomendada is displayed next to FSS and FSL for this student. The Recomendada appears next to any measures recommended for progress monitoring based on student performance. These are the earliest skills in which the student has not reached benchmark. Now that you know how to launch a measure for progress monitoring, let's focus on what information to consider when choosing a measure. We'll look at a few mClass with DIBELS 8th edition examples first. mClass has grouped these first grade students together for instruction based on their most recent data. The name of the group is Decoding, and their instructional focus is reading words with simpler patterns fluently. These students can blend CVC words as whole words, but not consistently. And they need to work on specific letter sounds and on reading whole words fluently. These are the observed patterns these students have in common based on their performance on each of the measures listed to the right. They make random errors with letter sounds, and they're accurate but slow with decoding. They also have difficulty reading two-syllable words for word reading. If I select one of these patterns, I see all of the recommended activities that address this pattern of need. When I navigate to measure selection for Ava, one of the students in the group, I'll see again that NWF is the default recommendation. Here I want to use professional judgment to consider if this recommendation fits the targeted area of instruction. In this example, it does make sense to use NWF to progress monitor these students because alphabetic principle and phonics is the focus of Ava's group's instruction. Let's turn to another Grade 1 example. These first grade students are in a group named Phonemic Awareness. These students can segment some word parts, and they need to work on identifying first, middle, and last sounds in words with 3+ phonemes, and continue building fluency in phoneme segmentation. These are the observed patterns these students have in common based on their performance on each of the measures listed to the right. They're accurate but slow with segmenting. They segment words with 2 to 3 phonemes, and they segment all but beginning blends and segment all but ending blends. Again, if I select one of these patterns, I see all of the recommended activities that address this pattern of need. When I navigate to measure selection for Samir, one of the students in the group, I'll see that NWF is recommended again. Does this measure match the targeted area of instruction? No. The instructional focus of Samir's group is on phonemic awareness, not alphabetic principle or phonics. Instead, I'll want to use PSF to progress monitor these students to align their targeted area of instruction. Let's look at an example with older students. This is a group of 5th graders whose instruction is focused on fluency. These students can read connected text accurately, and they need to work on building fluency and reading high-frequency, irregular words in context and in isolation. These are the observed patterns these students have in common based on their performance on each of the measures listed to the right. They have difficulty reading 3 or more syllable words, and they're accurate but slow readers. If I select one of these patterns, I see all of the recommended activities that address this pattern of need. When I navigate to Measure Selection for Marianne, one of the students in the group, I'll see that ORF is the default recommendation. This recommendation does fit the targeted area of instruction, fluency, since that is the instructional focus of Marianne's group. However, given Marianne's at-benchmark accuracy score and well below benchmark fluency score on the Grade 5 benchmark passage, it may be more informative to progress monitor off-grade with a Grade 4 or even Grade 3 text. The easier text may give Marianne more opportunity to demonstrate what she has learned. First, I'm going to choose ORF from the All Measure drop-down menu. Then I'm going to change the default grade selection to Grade 3 or 4 to assess with an off-grade form. If you do not have access to the printed kit for the grade you've selected, find the student-facing materials for all the measures and grades in the PD library. Now let's look at several mClass Lectura examples to help illustrate what information to consider when choosing a progress monitoring measure. mClass has also grouped these first grade students together for instruction based on their most recent data. The name of the group is Phonological Awareness, and their instructional focus is phonemic awareness. These students have some phonological awareness, and they need to work on segmenting words into their syllables and phonemes. These are the observed patterns these students have in common based on their performance on the measures listed to the right. They're accurate but slow, and they have difficulty segmenting syllables with I and syllables with U. If I select one of these patterns, I see all of the recommended activities that address this pattern of need. When I navigate to Measure Selection for Leo, one of the students in the group, I'll see that FSS and FSL are the default recommendations. In grades K and 1, if students' scores are at risk in FSS and FSL, both measures will be recommended for progress monitoring. I again want to use professional judgment to consider if these recommendations fit the targeted area of instruction. When we look at Leo's scores, his overall composite score is well below benchmark, but his most foundational measure skills are below benchmark. He is receiving targeted instruction in a phonemic awareness group, so I'll definitely want to progress monitor with FSS. However, because mClass is recommending that Leo be progress monitored in both FSS and FSL, I'll want to carefully consider the instruction he's receiving when deciding whether to progress monitor both measures. If Leo's receiving instruction in both phonological awareness and letter sound knowledge, I'll want to progress monitor both measures. If instruction is focused solely on phonemic awareness, progress monitoring in FSS on its own will yield information about the effectiveness of instruction. Now let's look at a second grade example. These second graders are in a letter sounds group. The students in this group have some phonological awareness, and they need to work on learning the primary sounds of letters and digraphs and building fluency in letter sound association. But when I take a closer look at Javier's benchmark BOI scores, I notice that he's scored 0 in all of the required second grade measures. And I also notice that he scored 0 on the optional phonological awareness measure, Que Queda. I'm going to need to look closer at his progress monitoring and instruction to ensure his instruction is meeting his needs. I can see that mClass is recommending that Javier be progress monitored with FEP because it defaults to the lowest benchmark measure for any grade level where students are demonstrating need. But because Javier has scored 0 on a phonological awareness measure, I'm going to want to use my professional judgment to override mClass's recommendation and progress monitor with FSS and possibly FSL to ensure his progress monitoring matches the instruction he likely needs in more foundational skills, even though FSS and FSL are not grade 2 benchmark measures. I'm going to choose a first grade FSS form to better understand Javier's phonological awareness skills. Once I have a better understanding of what Javier can do and where Javier needs support, I can adjust my instruction to ensure I'm meeting his needs. If you do not have access to the printed kit for the grade you have selected, find the student-facing materials for all measures and grades in the PD library. At this point, you've learned how to launch a PM measure, how to select a measure based on the targeted areas of instruction, and you've also learned when off-grade level progress monitoring may yield useful instructional information. I invite you to review your mClass instruction student and group recommendations to see which measures would give you the most useful information about your students' current skills and the effectiveness of instruction. This table shows the default progress monitoring recommendations for DIBELS grades K through 6. Where will you utilize the default mClass recommendations to progress monitor your students? And where will you use your professional judgment to override the default recommendations to best meet the needs of your students? This table also shows the default progress monitoring recommendations for Lectura grades K through 6. Again, where will you utilize the default mClass recommendations to progress monitor your students? And where will you need to use your professional judgment to override the default mClass recommendations to best meet the needs of your students? Thank you for watching, y gracias por su atención.